so late. It's so late, you guys. How are we still doing this? Thank you for coming here. Thank you for coming to watch me read something. I'm Slater. I've written a bunch of books and not a lot of short stories, but I did write a short story recently, which is what I'm going to read. I'm going to cut this intro short because I want to make sure I get it all out. So it's about being a writer in the year of our Lord 2023. It's called Kibble Wolf. Though I knew each of my neighbors by face, I had yet to learn any of their names. But nods were shared whenever we passed one another by, and half smiles were offered in that I see you, you see me kind of way. On occasion, we might even share a quick how do you do, delivered in a single catabatic breath. How do you do? Like it were one word. Everybody in this apartment complex is friendly like that. And I know it's not a competition, but I'm the friendliest one of them all. Perhaps that's why I feel a certain amount of kinship towards my fellow building mates, an inherent yet unspoken ideological rapport. Take the guy who lives directly across the courtyard from me, for example. We've never shared a word beyond the requisite pleasantries, but I could tell you that if we did, we'd get along just fine. He and I share a lot of similarities. At a glance, you might even mistake us for brothers. We're both middle-aged and slightly overweight. We both have the same Spartan fashion sense, choosing function over form, accessibility over couture. Like the tide at sunset, his hairline had long since receded. Mine had too, but I didn't think it was quite as noticeable on me. I'm just saying, I'd be the good-looking brother, comparatively speaking. One time he had a copy of A Tale of Two Cities under his arm. I've read that book. He and I could talk about Victoria-era literature, or our failed marriages, or whatever else happened to pop into our heads. I could only assume he's also a divorcee. He has that divorcee sort of aura about him, that damaged puppy dog look in his eyes, just like me. But of course, I've grown up a lot since I've turned 40. And no longer am I prone to dramatics or hyperbole. These days, I've discovered a healthier way to express my emotions. I have become a professional writer of fiction, just like the aforementioned Tale of Two Cities scribe, Charles Dickens. The best part about writing fiction is you can just talk about yourself the whole time, and nobody will know which parts are real and which parts are made up. For instance, am I really 40 years old? And have I actually ever read a Charles Dickens book? These are the exact kinds of questions which we may never know the answer to. So I consider myself lucky to have found fiction as an outlet, and luckier still to have found a community of like-minded writers online to whom I can relate to in all the ways most non-creative, non-writers might not understand. Because while I am unquestionably the friendliest person in my apartment complex, the kinship I share with my nameless neighbors is nothing compared to the kinship I share with my Twitter followers. Indeed, the folks on Twitter are more like a family to me than my own flesh and blood. As far as I know, my biological sister's never so much as composed a single poem in her life. That's why I never call her. What would we even talk about? But on Twitter, I finally feel like I belong to something bigger than myself. I retweet people, and they retweet me. Retweeting is probably the most intimate thing two people on the internet can do. You see, my feed is my brand, and every retweet is an endorsement. And if I retweet you, and you turn out to be a shitty person, that would make me a shitty person by proxy. And then everything I've built, my whole writing career, would all come crumbling down around me, just like the drywall in the corner of my bathroom. Water damage from the unit above is my guess. The landlord keeps telling me they're sending someone out, but it's been a few years and no one's coming out so far. But I'm not one to complain about these little things, and overall, this apartment I live in is nice. It's very minimalistic, very storage locker-esque. 350 square feet, only $1,700 a month. Not a bad deal in this economy, but writing is a tough way to earn a living. Money is often tight, so I cut extraneous expenses when and wherever I can. Like I'll trim my own hair. I don't turn on the heat in the winter. And I only eat Kibble Wolf brand dog food, which is basically a steal at 50 cents a can at the grocery outlet downtown. It's not that Kibble Wolf tastes better than any of my other dog food options. In fact, quite the opposite. It's savory, but in all the worst possible ways. The flavor profile usually landing somewhere between spoiled meat and wet mud. The smell of it alone is usually enough to make me nauseous, but nutritionally speaking, Kibble Wolf far surpasses any of their competitors, delivering more vitamins and minerals per serving than the fancier brands like Good Paws, or even Capital Chow. I'm a very savvy consumer, and I know that when you buy Capital Chow, what you're really paying for is the label. Sometimes think about all the artists who have come and gone before me, and all the sacrifices they must have made to leave their mark. Sophocles, Shakespeare, Charles Dickens, Lena Dunham. These are the grand storytellers whom throughout the ages have plumbed the depths of the human experience. For truths so inexorable, they give shape to the world. Their voices shall never be silenced, and carrying on in their proud tradition, so too neither shall mine. And if you're talking bang for your buck, Kibblewolf dog food is the only way to go. There's a courtyard in the middle of this complex for us residents to use at our leisure. It's kept impeccably landscaped, although almost nobody ever goes on it, except for this one girl who likes to do yoga out there in the sunshine. She doesn't even lay a mat down. She does her yoga right in the grass. She's very flexible. It's quite impressive. My guess would be she's in college. She looks about college age. Aside from the handful of us divorcees, most people in this complex are around college aged. It makes sense. These apartments are too small to raise a family in, and once you enter a long-term relationship, you might realize how limiting a building like this may be. I keep a folding chair set up next to my window, positioned in such a way that I could see her, but she can't see me. I chose this angle because I don't want her to look up and notice me sitting there and accidentally mistake me for some sort of creep. I'm not a creep. I'm a very respectful person. I'm not doing anything untoward in here. It's just a chair by a window. It's a perfectly normal place to put a chair. And I consider this yoga girl to be an aesthetically pleasing part of the scenery, like the landscaping itself. I ogled her no more than I would, say, a very attractive plant. So that was the routine. I'd wake up, do a little writing, then spend the rest of the day watching this young woman do yoga in the courtyard while checking my social media accounts and eating my Kibblewolf. It was a simple life, a good life, the life that I chose. But then one evening, as I was sitting in my chair and chowing down on my affordable yet nutritionally dense dog food dinner, I noticed something I hadn't before. On the opposite side of the courtyard, in the apartment directly across from mine, where the other middle-aged, overweight Victoria-era literature fan lived. He had a folding chair also set up by his window, positioned at just the right angle so he could see the yoga girl without her seeing him. And he was looking at her now, as I had been. And he was eating Kibblewolf too, just like I was. I found myself bothered by this in a way I couldn't quite put into words. It was like something had been stolen from me, some intimate and ineffable thing. And I don't mean to sound possessive about the yoga girl either. As I told you before, her beauty existed for all of us to enjoy, like a sunflower or some sort of shrub. No, what perturbed me most was the method in which this man ate. Greedily shoveling Kibblewolf into his mouth with a stainless steel spoon straight from the can, he actually looked like he was enjoying it, or at the very least like he didn't mind the taste. Chunks of brown gravy ran down his chin and dribbled across his pale, shirtless chest. Yet bite after ravenous bite he continued, until his can was empty. He even licked his utensil clean. Sadness and anger and pity, confusion, these conflicting emotions swelled up inside of me faster than I could take them apart. Before I could even get my head on straight, the man swiveled in his chair so that he faced me. It was like he already knew I was staring at him. From across the courtyard, the two of us locked eyes. I raised my own can of Kibblewolf in a semi-salute, held it there long enough to ensure he could register what it was. He cocked an eyebrow, perhaps trying to parse out my intentions. So I cocked an eyebrow back at him, trying to parse out his intentions as well. Before he could make another move, I shoved a couple of huge spoonfuls of goopy dog food directly into my mouth, bigger than the spoonfuls I just saw him eat. My cheeks bulged, my eyes watered. It tasted like old beef that had festered in the sun, and my body instinctively tried to reject it. Gobs of thick drool spilled over the crest of my lips, but I slurped them back up and swallowed them back down. Gulp, every last goddamn drop. And a sense of vindication overcame me. Though only for a moment, because the man across the courtyard had already opened a fresh can of Kibblewolf, and into his puckering gullet heaped another wet wad. His cheeks bulged even further than mine had, and his eyes watered even more. Well, I wasn't about to let this fucking asshole make me look like a fool. I don't care if he and I shared an inherent yet unspoken ideological rapport. This was an act of aggression on his part, and I had no choice but to respond in kind. I stuffed more Kibblewolf into my mouth. The man across the courtyard did the same, and back and forth we went, like a wretched game of chess, eating giant, disgusting scoops of dog food one after another. The rotten smell of it assaulted my nose from the inside and created a sort of tide pool of vomit in the back of my throat, but I managed to choke it back down with the final few fetid nuggets until my spoon clicked against the bottom of the tin. All done. The man across the courtyard appeared incensed, like I were the one who transgressed upon him and not the other way around. I could only shake my head. Some people have no sense of decorum. He got up and walked to his kitchen, where he opened one of his cabinets. I had to strain my eyes, but I could see it was completely packed with cans of Kibble Wolf. Dozens of them, neatly arranged with the labels facing out like it was some sort of pet store display. He grabbed one, sat back down, peeled off the lid, and started eating it in what I could only describe as a threatening manner. With my reputation both as a man and a good neighbor now in question, I had little choice but to reciprocate with equal zeal. I went to my cabinet, which was also packed with dozens of cans of Kibble Wolf, grabbed one, planked back down in my folding chair, and started doing the same. Not so much chewing as I was snarfing, though no matter how fast I guzzled the dog food down, I could still taste every vile flavor. Horse necks and pig buttholes and goat hooves, whatever other odds and ends they put in there. Each chunk of undercooked meat stewed in a miasma of feculent room temperature juice. The moment he finished, the man across the courtyard ran back to his cabinet. This time he grabbed a whole handful of cans, as many as he could carry. I responded by doing the same. Sitting back in our chairs, we both resumed eating, as fast as we could, finishing one can of Kibble Wolf and immediately moving on to the next. The two of us were locked in this horrible arms race, but I refused to back down. I refused to let this weirdo win. I was sweating profusely, and I too had to lose my shirt. And not long after that, I was pantsless as well. The man across the courtyard saw this and immediately dropped trow. Both our bellies bloated like balloons, no longer restricted by our former clothes. We were nude and free and eating Kibble Wolf brand dog food at an exponential rate. I threw up every few bites, but luckily the regurgitated chunks were mostly still intact, so all I had to do was slurp them back down. A vicious cycle, some might say, but I was still making progress, albeit not as fast as I would have liked. 2 in, 1 out, 3 in, 2 out, etc. Ironically, the process of eating this dog food was not dissimilar to how a novel is written. Write, delete, rewrite, and so on. It's an arduous process, honing in on the things that really matter, beyond the solipsistic flourishes, beyond the abstract metaphors, beyond the absurd and shocking imagery. As a writer, you must ask yourself, who are the characters? What are their goals? And what lengths are they willing to go to achieve them? So by this point, the yoga girl was gone. Her long-term boyfriend showed up an hour ago with a truck, and the two of them filled it with everything she owned. They must be moving in together, I figured. Somewhere with more square footage, no doubt. These apartments just aren't big enough to accommodate a family. I could barely breathe. My stomach distended, and at some point I must have began shitting myself because a trickle of hot diarrhea continuously ran down the back of my legs and puddled up around the dozens of empty Kibble Wolf cans on the floor. The guy across the courtyard was shitting himself too. In fact, a lot more diarrhea was coming out of him than had been coming out of me. He keeled over and was spraying shit out of his asshole like a fire hose all over the walls. It splattered this way and that, like a Jackson Pollock painting. Though, unlike Pollock, I found the artistic merit behind this questionable. I knew there was no intention of this mess beyond the urgent and explosive need to evacuate his bowels. Anyway, I considered this a win on my end. The man across the courtyard was curled up in the fetal position in a pool of his own shit and piss and puke. And although I was also covered in my own shit and piss and puke, I was still standing. I had my moments of doubt in the past, but I knew right then I would always persevere, because that's what it takes to make it as a writer. Perseverance. And I knew through hard work and sacrifice I could one day achieve my dreams. So I put down my last can of Kibble Wolf, picked up my phone, and logged on to Twitter. Hey, just came up with a new idea for a novel about a beautiful young yoga enthusiast who falls in love with their middle-aged neighbor. Send tweet.